Hi, I'm Kit Fanner, professional photographer and videographer. I have been for about 20 years, but today I want to do something slightly different. The school holidays are coming up very soon, and I want to see if we can actually get the kids to be working on some photography and get some creativity going. What we're doing today is we're utilising the incense sticks, and when we light them, we watch the smoke come up. But I don't think you probably have ever actually looked really at the plumes of smoke and how creatively perfect they come into different roles if you just tap the sticks. So what are we going to be using for equipment today to actually get these lovely plumes of smoke and creative lighting working? Well, at the back we have a black background. It's quite a large black background. You don't need something that big. All you need is a couple of pieces of A4 black paper or black card. As long as it's just a small piece, that's all you need. We also have what we class as some flags here. Flags are just pieces of card, black sheets to stop glare from the flash when it fires onto the background. We have the camera itself. It's a standard DSLR. Any DSLR with a standard lens or a slightly deeper one with a zoom lens would be absolutely great. What we will need is a flash gun. Again, doesn't have to be a more powerful one, but just a flash gun that can work off the camera. Now, when we're working off camera, to fire that, we will need some receiver units which will actually allow the camera to fire. Now, you probably don't have these, but in the link below, what I have done is found some great little receivers and transmitters that are only about £15. Yes, it is an investment, but actually it's a small investment for the creativity that you'll find that you'll be using this more and more. Off-camera flash photography can have great results. We have a trusty tripod which will allow you to actually keep a steady shot, although you can handheld. If you don't have a tripod, don't worry. We also have, you probably see over here, which is an iPhone on a tripod. Now, the only reason that's there is not to film or photograph, it's actually to use the torch. Now, if we direct the torch toward the plume, you can actually see to focus on, but we'll go through that in a minute. We also need the trusty incense sticks. One tip, get some that you like the smell of, because when you're working on this for half an hour, if you get the wrong one, you won't like it. And the good old little cheap holder. Again, these are only a couple of pounds, and I've put the link below. I'm just going to turn the lights down now, because what we don't want is lots of stray light, because we actually want to control the light completely ourselves. So let me turn the lights off and let's get going. As I mentioned, what you will need is a DSLR. I mean, here we have an older Canon, a 5D Mark II with a 2470. 50 to 70 millimeters is going to be ideal for what we want to do here. So, as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be a full professional one because we're working in manual mode only for everything. So it really doesn't matter. So, camera settings. So what camera settings are we going to use today? Well, we're going to be using 100 ISO. 100 ISO is near the bottom of the ISOs, giving the greatest detail possible, no graininess or anything like that. The shutter speed, we're going at 100th of a second. The sync speed generally of a flash gun is around 200 or 250th, depending on the flash gun you want. But we're going lower, down to 100 today, purely because I want to bring the aperture, which is up at f11, from sort of 5.6 where we would normally do it, up to f11. f11 allows you to have more within focus rather than a narrow depth of field. And the white balance is set to flash because we're using flash, so we're getting that clean light. But we can do a lot more in post-production. We are shooting on RAW. Now, you can shoot on JPEG if you want to, but having RAW gives you greater flexibility to be able to actually edit in greater depth. So, camera set up, the lights are on, the flash is on, let's start shooting. As I mentioned before, we've got some flags here. Flags is just a term in the photographic industry for a shield against blocking light. So we don't want, when the actual flash gun is here, for it to burst out and encroach onto the black background, because we don't want the light to make the black background into a grey background and to be shown. We want a deep black invisible background so we can see the plumes of light. Now, you don't necessarily have to have these metal ones. If you've got some card or anything like that, that would be absolutely perfect. So what you can do instead, which I'm sure around the actual house, is you would have some Pringles, probably an empty pack like this one. Now, with this empty pack with the bottom cut, making sure that when you do cut it, you cut it safely, because some of the bits can be quite sharp. But instead of a flag like this, what you can actually do is insert the actual flash gun into the bottom, which is making its own flash, because you are directing this flash and the actual beam of light in one direction, which will not go onto the background. So if you don't want to use a flag and you've got a Pringle tube, other crisps are available. Use the Pringle tube to actually get your light source direct. With our flash gun, what we want to ensure is that when we shoot our beam of light, we're actually shooting it in a portrait rather than a landscape way, traditional. Most people will go like that. But if you actually fire the flash that way, you will shoot a rectangle going that way. Now, what we don't want to do is shoot a rectangle. We want to shoot a portrait style of light. So what we want to do is mount this probably around here. Now, as I said, this is on a low budget, so we're just going to use a candle holder to stick this onto the side to actually fire the flash straight across the incense stick. So as I mentioned before, we've got the iPhone here on another stand, which we're just going to use with the torch. So when we have the plumes of smoke coming up, this will allow the torch to actually highlight the plumes of smoke, because once we turn off one of these main lights, you won't be able to see the smoke particularly well. So the iPhone is great. Now, this particular light is a lot less brighter than the flash. So the flash will actually give out a lot more light, which will overpower this light. So this light is almost invisible. Okay, we have our camera and we have our lens. We have our flash gun. Now all we need to do is get our transmitter and our receiver to actually mount onto the camera, which will send a signal to the flash gun to fire. Okay, now that will be done remotely, because the actual camera position, we're going to be shooting this way and the flash gun is going to be firing this way. So we need a transmitter and a receiver for this to actually work. We have our camera all set up and we have our incense stick ready to light. So we have our iPhone here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this on, as I mentioned, just to get that light so it shines through the actual smoke, so you can actually have something to focus on. So as you can see, we now have our camera set up, we have our incense stick burning, and we also have our light from our iPhone. Now what I'm going to do is just show you, if I turn that off, how much harder that is to see the actual plumes of smoke to actually focus on. So having just a small light, and it could be just, if it's not an iPhone, it could be a bedside table lamp, just something small, or even a small torch. Okay, we've just done some test shots, and with the flash gun, we've worked out that it's going to be about 1/8 of a power. 1/8 of a power on the back of the dial. It can be dialed in or dialed out. If you find that your flash is too bright, you can actually move the flash away from the subject. If it's not bright enough and you haven't got any more power available, you can move it closer. So there's different ways of actually adjusting the power. But for today, we have 1/8 of a power on the back of this Canon 580. So we've allowed our incense burner to burn down a little bit to get this pure, lovely white smoke. What we can actually do is just take a quick test shot just to see how things are going, and that's looking pretty good. So rather than just the plume of smoke just going straight up, we want some great shapes. So what you can actually do is next to the actual incense stick, not on the tray but just on the table, is just tap and watch the amazing shapes that the smoke captures. And what we want to do is capture some of this as well. So let's have a look at some of these images. Yeah, can't see the black background at all. It doesn't show up, as with the flags have worked really well. But looking at some of these images, as we zoom in, they're almost skeletal in shape, almost like a spine. Amazing. So you can see the beauty that we can actually create by freezing action within smoke. So what are we going to do now? Let's head over to the laptop, start to process some of these and play around with them. We can invert some of the actual images so we have a white background with some darker smoke, or we can keep these, or we can add some colour. We can actually add some overlays of reds and blues. So let's head over to the laptop. Okay, as you can see, we've loaded the photos into our laptop. There's about 100 photos there. As I mentioned before, we can either shoot JPEG or we can shoot in RAW. Now I've shot in JPEG and RAW because I wanted to show you a couple of things. One, the RAW files I'm going to edit in Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, but not everybody has a software package. So using JPEGs, I want to show you a free way where you can have the beauty of the facility of Lightroom, Photoshop, but online, and you're able to use it absolutely free. So let me just show you. So we're going over to Pixlr here, and as I say, this is an online free editing tool for photos. Now at the bottom here we have the advanced E version, or we have the playful X version. So we're going to go for the E version, which is the editor version rather than the express version. And when you open it up, this is what you see. As I say, it's free. When you're using the free one, there will be adverts, etc., etc. So what you can do is you can actually create your own artwork in here, as you can see. So it's a great tool if you wanted to do thumbnails or banners or anything like that. You can also look for stock. Let's have a look, see if there's anybody that's done any smoke artwork. Yes, yeah, there's some people here that have done some smoke artwork. So once you've mastered all the smoke that we're going to go through, you could upload yours and sell them on here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the right hand side and press open image. It's opening up the image file that we've got, and we're just going to open the first one. Now it says here that our file is too big. We're always trying to shoot in the biggest file possible because we can always downsize. So this is one disadvantage just on this program, but 3,840 pixels is a pretty good size. So what we'll actually do is we're going to use that one, and there we go. Here's our first image. The image itself looks pretty good, but what I'm going to do is just take you very briefly through what you can actually do here. Now down on this side here, you've got an array of different tools that you can use. Now I'm not going to go through them all because you can actually hover over each and every one of them, and it will allow you to see exactly what they've been used for. And across the top gives you an indication where you can actually open an image, save, edit, transform, image, and so on. But what I want to do is go through to the adjustment palette here. Now with any image that you have, it's very important to not do a blanket adjustment to everything, because you want to pick out the elements of each thing. But on this occasion, what I want to do is just show you what an auto adjust will do to your image. So now here we go. So it's done quite a good job. It's picked out some of the highlights and boosted them a little bit. It's kept the dark black shadows and the background, so that's pretty good. You may be quite happy with this. So it's a good starting point. If we then go into some of the other areas, you've got your brightness and contrast. If you wanted to change that, brightness probably don't want to do because it would be over brightened. If I show you why, it actually takes your blacks and makes them a little bit murky grey. So we certainly don't want to do that. Contrast, as you can see, if we do the contrast, it does darken it up slightly. Now, some people do like to put just a tad of contrast in. So if we do just a little bit of contrast there. Now, vibrance and hue and saturation will add some colour vibrance and some so saturation of colours, which is great. But because we're in black and white practically at the moment, there's nothing there to do. So when we go into colour balance, what you can actually do is start to add colour into particular areas. Now, as we said before, the actual colours at the moment are pretty much black and white. So as I said before, we're actually going to deal with individual parts of an image. So if you want to deal with the highlights or the brightness, deal with that. Don't try and do everything at once. So if we picked highlights and then we took the red slider, we can actually change the colour of the actual plume of smoke. Now, either taking the red out or adding the red in, and vice versa with some of the other colours. As you can see, if you go too far, it gets a little bit too much. So that gives you an indication there on colour balance. So what you can actually do also is go into the colour lookup, which will do a change on both the foreground and the background of the colours. So here we could actually go for an inversion, which shows you in different colours, different vibrancies, etc. So just another option there. Or if you wanted to go to invert, this is where we're actually changing the black to the white and then the white to a darker colour. And then you can start to play around with your colours after that as well. So that gives you an indication what you can actually do with this free software. And what you then do is go File, Save, and then again Quality, bring it up to the maximum quality possible, and then press Download, and it will actually save it to your laptop or computer, whichever computer system you have. So that's Pixlr, which is a great free software which is web-based. So I'm just taking you into Lightroom now, where we've preloaded these photos as we did before. But what we want to do at the very top is go to Develop, which brings up a similar type of palette to what we had in Pixlr and which you have in Photoshop. A different layout, but basically they're all the same, but are much more refined. And this is where we'd actually bring in the raw images, which I've done here. So we are working on a raw image. As we mentioned before, the sliders here, you can change as you so wish. This is the white balance, which is a great starting point if you just want to change the colour of our smoke. But we don't want to do that on this one, so we're just going to go back and do it as shot. What we would like to do first of all, before we start anything in any detail, is just look at some of the contrast of the image and possibly some of the highlights. Shadows we could drop down a tad possibly, which will darken the background, but it does have a little bit of effect on the actual plume. The plume itself is quite bright already because we've just increased the highlights, but what you can do if you wanted to is bring up the whites a little bit more if you wanted to, but it will bring a little bit of the black in and it would appear a little bit grey. But you could also, as we have here with the blacks, just drop the blacks back down again. We also have clarity here, which puts a little bit more, as it says, clarity. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit just to show you what clarity does. So it just defines slightly. What you want to make sure you do is actually you don't overdo things to make them unnatural. Then what we have here is the curve. Now this is very good if you want to invert the image, where you just put the sliders in the opposite direction, which is what we had before on Pixlr. But what we're going to do is just bring this back. And then we have some other details down here, which we don't really we won't go into too much because we can sort of play around with those a little bit later. But what we have here is a presentable image, which we can actually save now. What we do want to do now is that we'd like to add some more colour into this, but what I'm going to do is a little bit more creatively. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our brush and we're going to zoom in to part of the image. So I'm just going to say start here, and with our brush we're going to brush this area here to change the colour. What we'll do is we're going to take our colour temperature and drop it down so we can actually see where we're actually painting. And what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter if you go over the black too much because you won't be able to actually see it, but once it comes into the areas here, want to see if we can actually run as fine as possible across that line, and then we're just going to paint the inside. That's it, lovely. And then we're going to press, because that's almost like a layer itself, we're going to press new, and we're going to go for another one, and we're going to come up to this side. Now it's kept the same colour. Now you can obviously keep the same colour if you want to, but what we want to do is actually change the colour to a different colour. So we want to sort of almost have a multi-colour plume of lovely vibrant colours across, just having a look, across the image. So what we then do is we can change that slider and play around with different colours. We can go for this one here, and then what we'll do is, let's have a look, let's go for this one here. So press new again, and we'll just swing around here. Once again, bringing that up there, and then we'll play, let's have a look, change that to a different colour. Let's go both ways, there we go, and then we can obviously add a little bit more into it and refine the details. So that's just a little bit of how you can change some colours in your image there. And what we would do is actually save that again. That's pretty much it for me. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you get some great results. I'd love to see some of your results. So by all means, when you've actually taken some photos, tag me in on Facebook or comment them on YouTube, whichever you prefer. But by all means, if you have any comments or questions, likewise, if you have any difficulties whatsoever, please message me and we'll go through them, and I'll help you out the best I can. So enjoy, stay safe, make sure that those hot incense sticks don't burn tables or anything like that. So enjoy the process, enjoy the photography, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.